by adding new things to a
28
special
years
town
we
meeting.
moved that
Something
cottage.
critical needs to be done, but,
Never had a problem.
but for all intents and
It's
purposes,
been
this
cold.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we had some
But
work
we
done
had-
on the pipes.
But we had not only cold, but sustained cold. You know, it didn't just dip and go back up, it was cold for
Also,
days.
it's usually later. And the snow does insulate the foundation.
It was in our packet,
right.
but what,
So-
this is not, this
But
is just a
also, we had
list.
some work done.
Okay,
And I think
it
they
is,
did-
2 minutes past 7, we have a quorum, so this is the, January 11th meeting of the Concord Finance Committee, and we are being, recorded and, sent out over, reality TV. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from November 30th, 2 meetings on November 30th, and the regular meeting on December 21st. And have people had a chance to go over those? And, how about the November 30th guidelines meeting? Anybody have anything on that?
Move that the minutes of the November 30th guidelines meeting be accepted as written.
Sorry.
Our recorder isn't here. Oh,
Oh. I've already made a motion. It's over.
tell me when it is.
Carrie sent them
Just-
around.
We're just doing the meeting
We're
minutes.
doing the minutes.
Yeah.
I move that we accept the minutes
All these
of
documents.
November 30th as written.
Second.
And,
All in
agenda
favor of
item.
accepting the minutes of November 30th? That's the guidelines.
That's the guidelines of.
Aye. Aye.
And then the actual Finance Committee meeting of November 30th. What should be correcting that?
I move that the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting for November 30, 2017 be approved.
Okay. Now,
Second.
oh. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that brings us to the minutes of the meeting of December 21st. Anybody have anything there? I had a couple of things. So let's see, on page 2, paragraph 3, and maybe this is nitpicky, but page 2, under fiscal sustainability. Oh, this didn't, the pages didn't show up the same way they did on the stuff that was emailed, but let's see, under fiscal sustainability. We were. Yeah, okay, that's it. The, on page 2, the third paragraph, Ms. Techley read the vote about the public hearing from the November 30th Finance Committee meeting. And I don't know whether the terminology, but it was basically, that was the charge that was voted at the November 30th meeting.
About, the section I read was about the public hearing. I
Well,
didn't read the whole thing.
didn't you read the whole thing?
I
Oh.
just read one paragraph about,
Oh, okay.
but I could reword that. It's a little, you're right, the way it's a little awkward.
Well, why don't you say you read the, one section of the minutes describing the charge
That's exactly what happened.
concerning the,
Yep.
the
And then there was one other item on page 3 under the chair's report. And, this is, I remember when we were at the, at that meeting, there was a little bit of ambiguity. This is on the second paragraph under Chair's report, talking about the December 12th school committee meeting. There were some cuts that were made in their initial budget that were accepted by the school committee. If you were at that
I
meeting.
was, I'm looking
Yeah.
back for my notes here, so I can refresh my memory.
There was another whole
Some-
bunch of cuts that were rejected, but there were some that were accepted by the school committee. And indeed, the budget that's in the warrant is less than, the initial amount that they came in with.
Are you talking about the
This is the,
CCRSD?
yeah, the school committee meeting. Well, it says some reductions were made, but there are still, and then at the meeting presented a list. I don't know whether that 300,000 is further cuts? Is that?
I don't recall there being further cuts. I recall
Right.
them going back over here's what we'd like to have done, and then here's like 700,000 off of what we'd like to have done, and then she did present, here would be further cuts, and here is
Right.
how, and she itemized them, but the school committee were really not,
They
they were
mixed
not
them.
interested in
Right.
any of them, feeling
there
that
was
they were
one-
too deep.
There was one level of cuts that they did accept, and then there was a further level of cuts that they did not accept. And I'm just, first of all, not knowing exactly the numbers, but I know that the numbers that are in the warrant are lower than the initial amount that was asked, so.
I think just omit the reference to the specific number.
A list, how about, okay, it's taking out that number and a list of further cuts, how's that? And then the rest of it's fine. Yeah, just take out the about 300,000 and just further cuts. There was one. Okay, that's, yep. That was the only thing that I had.
Actually, they are looking for funding sources, they want them to be.
Anybody else?
sustainable. That's true. So.
Any motion?
Move that they be accepted as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
You can still
I
vote.
can vote for minutes that I did
can.
not.
That's what the
cannot
town
balance
clerk, that's
there.
what the town clerk
Okay,
told us.
I'm in.
All right, everybody voted in favor.
There's good.
There's no
Wait, wait.
It is what it is.
Couldn't vote on them.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the warrant for the town meeting. Just, you know, a couple of things about that. Is this list of articles is,
This is the actual warrant, so this.
this one, okay, here it is. Oh, good, okay.
So can I just tell you what you have in front of you? Because the warrant, as you probably can imagine, changes because we have, we're in the process of editing it. Proofreading, yes. So yesterday we had the meeting with the moderator, and the document that you have in hard copy tonight is different than what was sent out in the packet. There were a couple of articles that have been taken off. There's been some edits and that. And then I did give you a list of all of the articles The first two sheets are all of them in the order that they appear in the warrant, and then there's a page for each of the different hearing nights and the articles that will come up on those hearing nights.
Great.
So this is the final list after the ones that were removed.
Yes, yeah.
So the first thing was the town budget. So Kerry and Chris have been working very hard to bring down the town budget, and there's now a difference of, I think it's 200,000 from our guideline.
Yep.
I just wanted to make note of that. And at their December 11th meeting, when they went over that, the select board, they did mention that they wanted some advice from the finance committee. I don't think we're gonna do the advice tonight, but, you know, when we come back to the guidelines, maybe we'll make a statement
Okay.
about where it works. And then there's the retail marijuana taxation excise tax article. I don't know, there's not too much to say about that it's in there. I think, you know, people have asked us what the anticipated revenue might be, and we're gonna have to do some research to find out what it might be. I mean, I guess the Department of Revenue has come out with a range of what they expect the overall, I guess that would be the state taxes to be.
State level.
And then so the amount available to towns would be a percentage of that, and then the amount that would go to each individual town would be a small piece of that. And then the range that they had was like 40 to 80 million or something, 40 to 88 million, I think, was the range that the DOR had come up with recently.
There is going to be a forum on the, all of the articles related to marijuana. We had a meeting yesterday with the chair of the select board and some representation from the Board of Health and the Planning Board. And they're looking at Wednesday, January 31st as a potential hearing date. That would be,
So that's to gather, that's to have the boards collaborate, or is that to gather public? Is it a hearing,
Well,
is it a public hearing? And that's-
the agenda is in process, but the intent really is just to put information out about the different articles, explain what is being contemplated under each one. We are putting in a request to have somebody from the Cannabis Control Commission come to, and there's been at least one of the members who has volunteered to provide assistance to the town of Concord, so hopefully we'll have somebody there. I am going to do some additional research on, I'm gonna start coughing in a minute, I apologize. On some of the revenue that is being received in other communities, in other states. I'm gonna have to excuse myself.
Sorry, yeah.
Carl, what's the state estimated revenue number you just quoted? Was that statewide?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the overall amount that the Department of Revenue was expecting the state would take in. And as I said, it's a very wide range,
Right,
like 100%.
40 to 80.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, the amount going to the towns would be a percentage of that, but the amount going to each individual town is, you know, kind of a guess, really.
Is there a formula? The state has any formula in mind Does the state have any formula in mind how they're going to allocate the money?
The revenue, that the state revenue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, there may be some things in the law about, I mean, there are some, things that they are trying to do, they're trying to promote, business in, underprivileged, areas, for example, that have been, suffering over the decades because of the prohibition and the war on drugs and stuff like that. So they're trying to, do something about that, but I don't know what other things.
So a town's revenues would not be a function of the sales in that town?
Yes, they would. That's the issue. You don't really know what the sales in the individual town are gonna be.
So we would get a 3% slice of what we sell within the town.
Right.
And the rest, I think, just goes back to state
Yes.
coffers for state programs. It's not like they're gonna take that and then redistribute that to towns. It's just
No.
gonna be.
No, 17% goes to the state.
So could we just look at other commodities like alcohol or cigarettes and look at what the state garners from those compared to what they think marijuana is going to be, and then we could say what taxes, do we get taxes from cigarettes or alcohol?
I'm not aware that we do.
We don't.
I'm not aware.
Or what percent
Sure,
of
is that
state
room?
sales?
Sure. No.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just thinking
Now
if we
she's
could
back.
use some kind of
Yeah.
comparable that way.
I was thinking
build
a
up
comparable
model.
experience in a state that is further ahead, like an Oregon or a Colorado might be
And pick a similar sized town.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to have someone
Yeah, just-
comparing.
Kind of get the same economic kind of town. That would be another way to triangulate.
Their tax rates, I think, are higher than ours, but we could adjust for that.
Right.
Than the 3%.
Yeah.
The local towns get higher rates.
The question was asked, but, and we probably should know, but the town doesn't receive any portion of alcohol, beverage, or cigarette taxes, does it?
No.
So we have,
Trying to figure out ways we could,
If the statewide total is 40 million? Is that what you said?
it would be anywhere from 40 to 88.
And that's a 17% tax?
Yes.
So 3% tax is not gonna be much at all. That's gonna be like 1/6 of that. And then we're a small part of that, right?
right,
Right.
So 1/6 of 40 million is gonna be, 2.4 million.
No, 7,
Yeah.
like 6.8 or something.
Or 6 point, whatever. And then we're gonna be, whatever Concord share of the Commonwealth is, of 6.8 million.
Well, 350 first.
It's not gonna be 351 towns, that's, but we don't know how many towns it will be, and maybe somebody in whatever other town that has it's got the really good stuff, and everybody's gonna go there. And then I guess we do want to start thinking about which articles we will want to make a recommendation on, and which ones I guess we're going to make a recommendation on all the finance committee, the ones that have FC. Were there any other ones that don't say FC that would have a fiscal component?
All of the enterprise,
Fine.
those aren't marked FC, but those you need to take
Oh,
action.
okay, so the yep.
Those are often on the, whatever it is, calendar, the
Consent calendar, yeah,
consent calendar.
yeah.
Um,
I don't see any other ones. And there were a couple of them that are, looking at, using, funds from the free cash.
So the, Article 10, the supplemental appropriation for CPS is, would have to be free cash because the tax rate has been set. And then,
That's because it's actually 2018,
2018.
Expenditure, yeah.
and then there's a request for $25,000 for, 2229 Main Street. I'm not sure which.
28.
Appropriate,
So that would also have to be a free cash article.
Item number 28.
Yes, yes. So could we go back to number 10 for a minute? I have a question. So this is, this is saying that the schools overspent their budget?
Yep.
We've got to
Yes,
give them money out of free cash.
right.
Do we know what that amount is? Or
400,000.
Or they,
That's
that's
the
a place, that's
A placeholder.
It's just a place, we don't know
They,
yet.
they
Okay.
don't know how far out of whack, maybe the snow removal will be less than they,
Okay.
you know, so by the time we get to town meeting, some of those problems will
Okay.
be more
It shouldn't be more than the
obvious.
400,000.
Can't be.
It can't be.
Right.
White can be?
Hmm?
White can be more than 400.
It can't be, because they put the number into the.
Oh, because
They don't
they
let
put
the
the
number,
Buffalo,
yeah,
can't
they
go
put
up and down
400
those
in
things.
there.
Yeah, but the warrant can change it from now on.
You can go down.
Go- it can
Yeah,
only go
the
down.
warrant is closed now, so.
It can only go down.
It can only go down.
So is there a rule how much you can overspend? I mean, what's,
You can't overspend at all. So this is an anticipation
Of overspending.
of overspending.
okay.
So we're currently spending money in fiscal year 18, and I guess they've run into some problems. What were the,
What was the-
Well, it's-
might have been
Unanticipated
tornado,
costs.
but
Yes.
also-
that was last year?
That was last.
Special,
year's
I
expenditure.
believe it's mostly related to special education costs.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we'll, be taking those up.
So just a question, Carl.
Mhm.
This is the whole process. So let's say the article comes, I guess it's number 10. And let's say the article says 400, is that much?
Oh, I'm sorry. Don't get too close.
No, that's okay. Okay, because- So my question was, Article 10, I don't know what it says because there's no language here, but let's assume it's asking for $400,000
Language is in this.
It's
packet.
in this
Yeah.
other packet.
in this package. Okay. So let's assume it's asking for $400,000. And let's assume the town meeting approves it. And let's assume the money is not spent, all of it. What happens to that money?
Well, that's a good question, because usually the school budgets, they keep the money.
So the language of this article is a request to increase the finance committee reserve. So it would go, if approved, it would go into the finance committee reserve. And if it's not spent, then it would become part of the free cash calculation.
Thank you.
So each request for expenditure would be reviewed by the finance committee.
It would have to be,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Just on the different articles, we're gonna start making our recommendations. Well, we have a meeting, another meeting. We have two more meetings this month. but it's kind of, January is a little bit early, I think, to start really working on the recommendations that, from past years.
I think we usually assign who's gonna look at what, so that at the public hearings,
Could you pull the microphone closer to you?
I believe the process has been in the past that you assign areas of responsibility for the articles that we'll have to make a decision on prior to the public hearings. And then at the public hearings, generally we all ask questions.
Right.
And get an update or more information is provided there. But then the person has the opportunity to sort of do their work at that point. And then at a meeting after the public hearings, then we would all be able to consult and come to some deliberation. And often that's just sort of more prior to town meeting as well. So if there's any additional information, and especially some of the, sometimes if it's a, public interest article or high interest, there'll be additional information that comes out. So sometimes we defer even our items till we gather more information, or there's more hearings on various things. So yeah, that was clear.
Yeah, usually we go through it and decide which ones we're going to make recommendations on, or we're gonna have to.
Some of them are very straightforward.
Right.
Streets and or whatever.
Yeah.
And others will require more work.
Right, and some of them we were able to
And some of,
basically make a decision on prior to the hearings, but then other ones.
right, and if there are any items that are high interest, I mean, if it's CPC, we can ask people to come in and provide more details. If they're not, if they don't have all the details at the public hearing, and we want them to come back, or if there are high interests, so we can sort of segment which ones, are very straightforward and which require more work
Yeah,
and
sometimes
study.
it's not, the night of town meeting, we're voting on what
Yes.
our recommendation is gonna be.
Yeah.
But we have two,
But I think for town meeting, we usually, when we come out with the report, we try and put in our recommendations. So can you work us back from that deadline of when the report
well,
is
yeah,
due? And then we know when we should, at what meeting we should try and get as many recommendations finalized as we
Well,
possibly can.
I was just gonna say, we have two hearings in February, the town and the schools. And then our next meeting, after the last meeting of January, is March 1st. So that might be a time to start on that process.
It depends on when the report needs to be
Well,
submitted.
the report has to be done,
The report is going to the printer on March 19th.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So then the March 1st,
and then we have another meeting on the 8th. So that would be the
So-
one, anything that's gonna be in the report, we would have to have
done by
by
then.
or at the March 8th meeting. Yeah. So basically, I would say that we're not gonna really do any of that in January. We're gonna go through February, and then we'll start March. The two actual meetings in March would be where we'd be making our recommendations.
Well, my recollection is last year Linda assigned several of the articles that were out of the norm for people to kind of do a little homework.
Yeah.
So that they were handled earlier, so that when you came to the major articles to spend some time on, you had those already out of the way. And here, for example, that one on the 229 Main Street, I don't know what that is, and I don't know how much, but my guess is that's one of those that could be assigned, somebody look into it, make sure that they're prepared to speak with even in January, the last January meeting, so that at least, hopefully that one's, out of the way, you don't have to worry about it. That's just a suggestion.
Well, why don't we try to quickly go through this? We'll see, probably a bulk of them are gonna be consent calendar things that we're not gonna have a whole lot of debate about. But let's just try to quickly go through and see if people wanna take some responsibility for becoming the experts on those articles. Of course, the town budget, I mean, that's sort of everybody. Yeah.
Well, I think the meeting procedures would fall to you. I mean, if we're looking at the Finance Committee hearing on the 26th, if you want to go through those first, or do you want to go
We're
one?
just going straight down. It says there's a column to the
Yeah.
right. If you just go through the whole warrant.
The whole
Just,
warrant.
the
Okay.
ones where somebody needs to do a little bit
Okay.
of background information, not making a decision or anything, just getting some background information on, was the ones that I was trying to basically pull out and.
Oh, I see.
And find people who want to become experts in that. But as I say, the town budget really is, I mean, that's something we're all working on.
I'd suggest, for example, 14 and 15,
Yep,
those people may not have a full understanding of the modern Municipal Modernization Act, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what kind of money's involved with those, but it'd be easy to work with Carrie, so easily, I think, someone could come back and articulate fairly easily what those are about, what's at stake, the pros and the cons. I'd be happy to do those things.
okay, yep.
Sorry, 14 and 15.
14, 15, 17?
Sure.
Sure, okay, yeah, that's. You'll know about the Municipal Modernization Act.
Did someone tell me what the premium reserve fund is? Does anyone know
I'd be happy to
Thank
tell you
you.
about that. So, when we issued debt earlier this year, we received a large premium. We received $324,000. It used to be that when you received a premium for non-exempt debt, you just took that in as a general fund receipt. Now you have to reserve it, and you have to use it to pay debt service. Up until a couple of years ago, you only had to do that with exempt debt, but now you have to use it to offset the debt service. So the new warrant articles, the new borrowing articles on the 2017 annual town meeting had language added to them that allowed for us to automatically resize a bond issue when we received a premium. But we didn't for bond issues or authorizations that were approved prior to 2017, they didn't have that language. So what we had to do was we had to reserve that premium, and now we have to ask town meeting to appropriate the premium. Going forward, it will just happen automatically.
Oh, okay.
Harry,
good.
in this context, what is meant by the term premium?
Well,
How is the
It's-
premium generated, I think, is the
Well-
question. Is it the change in interest rates from the beginning of an offering to some period through the offering?
I think that's probably the simplest way. I know when we make I know that question is gonna come up at town meeting, and I wanna be able to answer it in the most simple way, so I'm going to have to work on that
Research
language, yeah, but,
Can this be on the consent calendar?
It could be, it seems like it's a housekeeping item, but it may raise a question.
we haven't, the moderator hasn't yet decided what will be on the consent.
But the revolving fund one would not likely be on the consent calendar.
Well, there have already been some questions raised about that, so probably not.
Usually the consent calendar is things that over year after year are repetitive.
Yeah, and also not contentious.
And
If
not-
nothing comes up in any of the hearings, that's another way of possibly indicating it belongs in the consent calendar, because I don't have any questions.
I can't imagine Carrie having to explain this at town meeting and have people understand.
Tom,
pre-
could you push your microphone over closer to Phil? I'm sorry.
On Article 18, I can't imagine Carrie having to explain that to town meeting and that being controversial, right?
Well, hopefully not controversial, because it's saving people. But I mean, that doesn't mean people aren't interested in it.
Right.
I don't know. That-
Yeah,
the
I think it's,
moderator-
asking people to vote on something they don't really know what it is probably not gonna work.
It's on the consent calendar.
Well, no,
I think it's a good candidate for it.
okay, but I would expect somebody is gonna say, well, what is that? Let's pull it off the consent. At the beginning of the meeting, they pull things, or when the consent calendar comes up, they pull things off.
May I suggest that, for example, that's a good example, none of us really understand that one.
But you're gonna learn about it.
Maybe somebody should look into it on this committee. And for example, if you were to send out an email to all of the members of the committee, because a number of folks can't be here tonight, say, hey, the following proposed warrant articles do need a little homework to prepare for one of our next meetings. Please let Carrie or Anita or would you be willing to accept, just let, and then, because some of these make it.
I'll take this one, I'll take this
Alright, so these, for example,
premium reserve fund, number 18, I'll take that.
So, but the more you get taken off, like, my memory is with Linda last year, the more folks you got signing up to look into these, it's gonna make your job a lot easier come February and March.
Well, let's see if there's anything that, somebody really wants to do, and then if there's some left over, we'll, people should come to the meetings. So the next one, I don't know, the expenditure from PEG Act, it's kind of not really controversial in itself.
Which one?
Number 20,
What's EMT?
Enterprise.
yeah. And then the municipal capital projects, that probably some, people want to know about that. I don't know if anybody is,
Have we fully converted, just to stop at 20 for a second, have we fully converted over to the new model? Previously, we were taking money from the cable company and then somehow funneling it back to the school or some other thing, and now the town is taking on this responsibility. Is that completed, or are we still in transition?
September.
It's not completed.
It's not completed.
It hasn't, the only thing that has happened at this point is the town has provided notice. I believe July 1st is the start date.
Okay.
There is a petition article in here related to that, seeking to not allow that to happen.
Okay, then.
I think they're in the process of working out the agreement with Carlisle.
Okay.
You could,
Yep.
figure out how it can roll.
So we'll leave that for now. The municipal capital projects, does anybody have a hankering for,
Where's that, what number is that?
that's number 21?
I'll look into that.
Okay. That's usually, not big capital projects, usually
Yep.
like a boiler or a roof or something.
Right, okay.
I assume the alcoholic beverage bylaw amendment doesn't have any fiscal
No,
component to it?
It's to allow one-day
Oh, that's right,
licenses.
yep,
yeah.
yep. Community resilience goals, that's really about resilience for climate change, I believe, yeah.
It's very similar to what was approved last year, as I recall, in terms of sustainability.
Well,
We had a
yeah, but it's
manager.
not about the greenhouse gases, it's really about being prepared for floods or that sort of thing, yeah. Then we have the community preservation. Who's our community preservation person? I didn't bring my list of. Is anybody here a community preservation observer? I'll find out who it is. I usually have my list of observers with me, but
Peter. Isn't Peter the only one we're missing?
Is it Peter Fischella? I don't know.
well, June didn't make it, and Scott didn't make it. Oh, this is the Jarrow property, number 25. That'll be an interesting one. Want to grab that now? What? This is number 25. Is the property on Warner's Pond called the Jarrow property?
I think it abuts the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail.
Yep.
It's between the pond and.
Yep.
It's 2.5 million.
Anybody want to do that? Somebody must.
I'm
Jack.
being a West Concord person.
Okay.
Okay. So we're.
That's
25.
25. Community Preservation Act, Community Housing Fund. Well, that'll be whoever the CPA.
Was this not the one, Tom, Tarpley, that you commented on last year? Is this the same item?
You were the Community Preservation.
I was.
Observer.
So undoubtedly, if it was on the warrant last year, I did,
Well,
but I
remember
think
you-
this is a
No, the
generic.
one that he was on, but they were trying, there was
The one
a
that taxed.
housing proposal for affordable housing that was trying to establish a taxing model for the new development.
Right.
And Tom said, let's go and study that. And I don't think that this is that.
Okay.
No.
This is 247,000 to do phase 2 of the Peter Bulkley building.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
totally
I
different.
see,
I
okay,
think
so
they
it's really
came
a
in-
CPA thing, but
They
I guess
came
they
in
broke.
under budget, I
Oh,
believe,
this is returning the
and
money.
they're returning the
Yes,
money,
okay.
and so, and they have to come to the town to get approval for that.
I'll do that one.
Anybody interested in 229 Main Street? That's the former nuclear metals and so on, okay. Andrea does, yeah. Yeah, that's. The marijuana excise tax, I don't know, I guess I'll do that, unless somebody else wants to.
No, you've done the work on that.
Yeah.
Zoning bylaws.
A lot of zoning.
Yeah, well, there's the moratorium. And there's some regular, zoning bylaws, which we really don't usually get into. Okay, the moratorium, is that something that we would have an interest in?
Do you have anything to say
No,
about that?
I don't
Hmm?
think, I
You
don't
mean the
think
more-
there's a
the
financial
43? I
implication
don't
there.
either.
There's no direct financial
Yeah.
implication,
No.
no.
No, well, the impact is we don't get the money. With the moratorium, then
Until the moratorium is up.
Wait, what moratorium are we talking about?
This is
Oh,
this is article
marijuana.
number,
Got it.
the zoning one, where is it?
31. 30.
43, sorry,
The moratorium is 30,
30.
and then the Board of Health is 31.
Right.
It's an outright ban.
Yeah, so if you ban it, there's no revenue. There's no revenue.
Hmm?
There's no revenue also, because we're talking about 3% that goes away.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
So yeah,
is
we
that
do-
something that we
Yes.
should look into?
But the 3%'s
not baked into the budget now, is it?
It's,
No, that's
it's,
the additional revenue in the event that we.
it's just from August through December of this year.
Yeah.
It's, and the moratorium is moving that. I don't think we're gonna forego any revenues in terms of lots of sales of marijuana in that period of time. I don't.
Well, you don't know, of course, if the, if 31 does not pass,
Correct.
then it would be possible for somebody, for a vendor to apply to open a place between April and December, if there was no moratorium.
The planning board wants the time to write zoning bylaw enhancements to manage cannabis retail vendors. And they just got their draft regs December 30th or whenever the Cannabis Commission issued them, so they don't have time to write their bylaws to get them on this year's town meeting, which is why they want a moratorium.
It's, well, it just seems to me practically, to opine on something that practically there'll
Yes.
be no, I mean, I can't imagine someone's gonna open up a cannabis store in Concord or
Seems unlikely.
between now
It seems
and,
unlikely that it's.
between now and July, but,
Whatever, 8-month period.
But if we-
There's a high level of risk for the vendor, there's a high level of risk for the town, because the Cannabis Control Commission won't have regulations out until March, April, May anyway, so.
Well, they have them,
I
they
think
just, they're in draft form right now. You could certainly start formulating your legislation or your bylaws based on.
Your zoning.
Things can change, and if it's, you know, generally speaking, so I tend to agree with you.
Okay, we'll let 30 pass. What about 31? Do we want to,
I think it should pass for the same reasons. I don't think we ought to be involved in either 30 or 31.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
we should.
I just
really
don't think
go on.
that's
I don't
our-
think we really- that's our-
whatever the will of the people
Yeah.
of the town.
Yeah.
okay, I think the rest on that page, except for the enterprise ones, which are, again, they're kind of standard articles. I don't see any other ones that would have a fiscal impact. Which brings us to the last few, and, oh, let's see, wait a minute, we have 49 through 53. Something's out of whack here. Oh, the first page, no, okay, 1, 4, 49, 53.
And since the enterprises really don't require any financing
No.
from the town, they're self-sustaining because they're enterprises, I'm not sure that we offer opinions on these items.
Well, they're not really controversial, yeah.
No, they're usually,
Yeah.
I mean, they're often
And
just
the
in the
money
consent
comes- yeah.
calendar anyway.
Doesn't come out of the,
I guess
That's
the only one might be the BD, I don't know what, the BD
you know,
Center.
The BD might, only because they've been having some, membership issues and that creates financial stress for the BD. But I don't even know that we really have to opine on that. I mean,
No,
that's sort
I
of
don't
the
think
internal issue of the BD Center.
I mean, unless they come forward with some proposal that's,
They're looking for other
But I
infusions,
don't-
which they're not.
no, so I think those are probably not
I think they
something,
still have, don't they still have some kind of reserve fund?
Maybe that they're eating into that and
Oh, yeah,
they're
yeah.
pointing to that or something, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, they're in a tough spot.
Yeah, they are.
They,
They've either got to fundraise or the town has to support.
At that point, we would be interested.
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
If they come
Yeah.
with their hat in hand, we would certainly be interested.
Okay, well, I think that's it.
I mean, the school ones, like, again, that's gonna be, we're all gonna be working on those. And our school observers will be the experts on that.
We'll do our best.
Let's see. We were gonna talk a little bit about the finance committee report, which, we should be, having the material ready for by March 19th. Terry was gonna.
Yeah, I just really wanted to get this on everybody's radar, especially the newer members. Finance Committee report, this is a big chunk of work for all of us. March 19th is the deadline that it's going to the printer. So your deadline is much sooner than
Like a week before
March.
that?
At least a week before that. I'm sure you're all,
Whatever.
yeah, I'm sure you're all familiar with the report. A lot of the report I put together, because a lot of it is just all of the documents that we're working with throughout the year. But for the members, the important things are the observer reports. We don't always have an observer report in for every for everything that you monitor during the year, but the things that are the most important, if there's something going on, we do have those observer reports. So if you are an observer to the schools or the CPC or something like that, you probably should be planning on having a report. The reports can be a paragraph, a half a page. They don't have to be extensive. And then the chair is responsible for the letter to the residents. But again, a lot of that is information that I put together with my staff. So I think, by the very beginning of March, especially the observer reports where you're not necessarily waiting for a public hearing, or ones where you're not waiting for a public hearing to happen, it would be good to have that the end of February or the beginning of March. At the very latest, I would say we should be targeting, March 10th, March 12th, around there. We do, we have to take this and we have to put the warrant, put the two reports together. So there is a lot of formatting, and we go back and forth with the printer, and so it does take a decent amount of effort.
The school may be, well, of course, it's gonna be, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, there may be things happening, at least through the hearings, anyway.
Right, but there definitely will be, some reports that people may want to include that aren't necessarily dependent on something happening at a public hearing.
So with respect to the observer report, these are consequential financial committee and financially related topics that have taken place through the course of our observation?
Yeah,
So what is it that we're doing? Because it sounds like you can go to the minutes of each of the board meetings, so why are we replicating work?
Well, I think if there's anything specific that you would like to call to the attention of residents. I mean, this is an annual report that you put together. It's geared toward the town meeting warrant, but if there are specific things that you would like to call to the attention of the residents, I think that's important. Last year, we had a report from the Recreation Committee Observer. And, with everything that happened at Beatty, that was something that was in here. But I can circulate this if you want to take a look at it because you probably don't know where your copy is from last year. It's probably not on your, your coffee table, but,
Yeah, circulating in electronic form so
Yeah.
that we can copy
yeah,
parts, you know, from.
yeah, no,
last
that's
It's on,
fine,
it's
that's,
on the town website, yeah. Yeah.
okay.
But they haven't gone back decades, but yeah.
Did the moderator indicate yet what they thought the high interest topics might be or
No,
not?
not
Okay.
yet.
Some people are leaning towards the leaf blower. Generating a lot of.
Oh, the dog one, yeah.
Okay, but ones without financial, usually, yeah. So I think for us, it'll be the school budget discussion.
So on our topics of special interest, we have our fiscal sustainability. We've given ourselves a charge, and I was supposed to, I guess, nominate for, I don't know, instead of, the motion was to appoint, I don't know. I will nominate, and then we can vote on it. How's that, okay? So the four people are Tom Tarby, John Hickling, June Rybczynski, and
May,
Mary.
yes.
Yes. So we have a motion to appoint those people to the working group.
I'll second it.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay. Well, I'll leave it up to the four members of the working group to,
Carl, I'd like to make one observation to the four people. And it's not easy, but so what we were talking 2 weeks ago as a potential tax change is real. And the towns are going through that. So the net effect of sustainability will be 20 to 30% increase in your taxes. Not the portion of the tax that is we pay to state income and the property tax, since we'll be limited by $10,000. I mean, that's the law of the land right now. So it's not a theory anymore. So even though if the taxes don't increase, let's say next year our property town taxes, we vote 0 increase. To the people in the pocketbook, it will appear an increase. If they're expecting a refund from federal taxes, they will not get the refund. They'll be asked to pay some more money. I know the town is looking for ways to do it. You have seen, most of you have read articles, how to circumvent the law by having charitable contribution.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of things floating around. But if they don't materialize, the net effect will be an increase in the federal taxes for the portion of this, since we pay 5% state income tax and a good chunk of property tax.
6
Which,
points.
yeah, which is more than $10,000 in most cases. There will be a net increase. And so when you talk about sustainability, I just want you guys to be aware of it. That is, even a 0% increase will hit the pocketbook.
Yeah, we had a considerable discussion about that at our last meeting. And, it's just, yeah, not looking good for states and municipalities.
So whatever was thought to be sustainable prior to this tax bill is
It would be
today
less sustainable.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem was sort of critical, but now it is really critical. So whatever you think, just think through hard. Even though we're not seeing it today, a year from now, when you do your taxes next year, and if you're expecting a refund, you may not see a refund. And that will be because so if we increase the taxes, property taxes, which is all we care about here, we don't have much say in the state income tax.
Well, that's
will-
the thing about sustainability. I mean, it's really looking at the future and these things that are gonna happen in the future that are going to
Right.
affect the sustainability of the budgets.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why we have to do it, so we can prepare for the future, but that's what makes it difficult to do.
Yeah, and what makes it even more difficult is that there are ways to circumvent it, and the state is trying to figure it out. New York is thinking about doing it. So depending on what depending on what comes out of that, the net effect may be different. Maybe we can make the effect go away by creating charitable issues and making a wage tax instead of a state income. I mean, you guys know what was floating around as potential ideas.
Yep.
We don't know what will materialize and what will be, considered a legitimate way to circumvent it. But the net effect is that's another thing one has to think about it. If we do circumvent it, let's say Massachusetts and New York and California, then the net effect will be, which is not really our concern in the Finance Committee, but your debt, the national debt will increase because the federal government assumed
I mean, the $1.5 trillion
Would be worse.
is $2 trillion?
it will be more, for sure. Because
they're not
nobody
getting what they
thought.
expected by making us pay it,
Yeah.
because we're not paying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because nobody thought that there is a way to circumvent it. So if we do circumvent it, unless you are successful, the states are successful and the towns are successful, then the deficit will increase. So bottom line is, it's not petty no matter which. If we succeed, then there is an effect on the national debt, which we don't control here, but we pay a part of it. I mean, it's part of, you take the total debt divided by the
The
population.
future will be paying for
The
it.
future will be paying for it in a different way. Or your interest rate will go up because you have to borrow the money and the interest rate will go up. So it has a financial impact. What makes it difficult is, one thing is certainly the law is passed, so now we don't have to worry about it. Now the only uncertainty is, can we circumvent it and to what extent? So that's something, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you gotten any feedback from the long-range planning team that's putting together the long-range plan? Are they addressing any of these issues in that report?
To the best of my knowledge, no. That came up yesterday, and it doesn't sound that there has been any. There will be a draft coming out, I guess it's at the end of February, and I think, we will be in a position to make comments about that. So, I mean, I had some hope that the sustainability initiative could have some interface with the long-range plan, but we'll see how that works out.
Thanks.
Benchmarking, how's our benchmarking?
I can help with the report there. We had a meeting today, and we are making slow progress, but we're coalescing around something. I'm going to hand out some data because benchmarking is all about data. Hopefully I haven't created a nightmare. It looks like it's printed on two sides, so that's good. So we'll hand some out that direction, hand some out that direction. And that has to go around. It stops in the middle and Phil doesn't get one, and Brian doesn't get one. There's more.
Poor Brian.
He's at the end of both.
You should sit here next time.
It's the same thing.
You'll get one. There should be, there should be.
No, there's coming, some more
There's
coming
plenty.
around.
All right, so just to give you a quick update on what the benchmark, we've had several meetings, but the first several were really to just try to establish a cohort that was agreeable to everyone who was attending. Now, the people from the Finance Committee are not formally members. This is really a budget subcommittee of the school committee, so it's very school-centric from that perspective. The comparative cohort of towns that were selected, a lot of them are driven by the way in which we view our school systems as being similar. The FinCom members are literally just observers because we're not literally allowed to be members. That being said, I assembled this, so I'm doing the work anyway. I went to the DOR to get a few different critical statistics. The single-family residential tax bill the average single-family residence value, the average per capita income in this cohort of communities, and on the backside, we also have average new growth, and then just population growth. So these are just data, you got a one-page version, here's the two-page version. So, the key here, which Scott's been telling us for a while, is that our tax rate does kind of march ahead. On a 5-year basis, we're going up 3.74%. On a 10-year basis, 3.62% annually. So that's on the other side, Carl. And we're in the top third of this cohort. We are, and this is a pretty high-end group. Weston is only moving ahead on a 5-year basis at 3.09, on a 10-year basis at 3.5. So our taxes are our tax growth rate is up there in terms of this very select group. However, the single-family residence value, average single-family residence value, we're doing okay in the last 5 years, but over the course of the last 10, not a lot of growth, but that's because we had that huge drop-off in 2008. So we're barely recovered from that. That's where we are.
But why it is unique to Concord?
What's that?
The drop over 10 years that you talked about, 2008, why is it unique to?
It's not unique.
It's
The towns within 128 have recovered smartly. The ones outside of 128 have not. If you just look at the 10-year column, you'll see that Lexington, Winchester, Belmont, Wellesley are all have a 10-year growth rate that's positive over 1 to 2.5%. But the minute you drop over the 128 barrier, it's all not that high. They're not recovered. So it has a lot to do with commuting time, with people taking advantage probably of, oh, look, the prices are way down, so now let's move in, and so we're not as attractive from that perspective, I guess. I don't know, but we're doing okay over the last 5 years with a 3%. So this is the largest investment that most families have is their home, and it's okay, but it's underwater over the 10-year. It's not underwater, but it's close to underwater over 10 years. Yeah, our per capita income is like scary. Over the last 5 years, we're not seeing growth. Now, some of that may be because over the last 5 years, we've increased some less expensive housing. We've added the Muse. We are adding these things on Forest Ridge for elders who don't have kids. And these people may not have the level of income that some others might have. So I don't know why our income growth rate is not very good over the last.
Well, we've also had the highest population growth, so on a per capita basis, that would influence that metric.
Yeah, so.
Shouldn't this actually be, but embedded in that, there could be some gems in terms of the diversity of people that are actually.
No, I'm not saying it's bad. It's not
No,
inherently bad.
I wasn't suggesting you were. I'm just saying that that's an interesting number relative to if I'm looking at Weston and a few of these other towns that might not necessarily have sort of the same driver.
Right.
Could be interesting.
No, that's true, but it also augurs to the fact that we cannot just hammer away with 3.5%, 4% tax increases every year when people's incomes or the breadth of incomes they're going up 0.63. It does give us pause when we think about constantly increasing our tax rate.
Are these values available as medians as opposed to
No,
averages?
this is
Sadly,
this is the averages, yes. So median numbers from the DOR. So what they probably have is like bulk numbers, and then they either divide by population so they can get to per capita. So the only thing they can give you is an average number.
So I have a lot of that data, Mary, that I've started working on.
By median? Not,
Yes,
great.
because of our
You could have a really,
sustainability
really wealthy
task
person
force.
move out, and there goes the average.
So you'll see it.
Right.
Do they subtract the population of the prisons?
Well,
Oh, I don't,
That's
well, the
always-
population of the prison, let's just call it a close to constant. I don't think that that's a big, it's not up or
But
down.
relative to other towns, it would have an impact.
Yes.
Per capita may change.
Yeah.
Per capita is the issue, right?
And, you know, that's the thing is, you know, we get population figures, you know, quoted here and there, or listed, but it never says whether it includes, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I know, you know, and-
The US Census, I believe, does include it, which is on this back side of this page. So the one that I had to revise since this morning is the average new growth. I took a look at that. So for Linda and John who were in that meeting, these numbers were different because I was calculating a growth rate between two endpoints of a series, and that doesn't work when these are just year-over-year percentage increases. So these are just 5-year and 10-year averages now, rather than a compound growth rate. So we have a slight variation in the way this thing ranked out, but it's pretty straightforward.
what is it growth in? I'm sorry.
New growth. New growth is new construction.
Okay.
You know, building the
Growth
hotel
of
on
the
Baker
assessed
Ave.
overall-
Growth of the
Okay,
assessed
so square footage
base.
of taxable,
The taxable base, the increase in the taxable base
got it.
is new growth. And that could be somebody putting an addition on their house.
Right.
It could be a tear down that's been rebuilt twice as
Bigger.
big.
Yep.
Or it could be building a new hotel or building a muse.
So it's
building
square
a-
footage of taxable,
The
Really?
dollar
Yeah, it's
value.
dollar
Okay.
value.
New square footage.
Yeah,
New
new
square
square
Yeah.
footage.
incremental,
Incremental.
Yeah, that's the figure that,
Right.
basically,
Thank
when we're figuring out what the levy limit is, that always,
We always get a little bump because
Yeah.
we have a
Right,
little
because-
extra
right.
goose because we have new growth. Now, our new growth has been relatively stable, 1.68 over 10 years, 1.63 over 5. But this year, I think, Carrie, you're projecting a little smaller new growth number, so we're getting kind of double hit with some of these operating budgets not being able to be
it's
sustained.
interesting, of all these, this cohort of towns, we have generally the 10-year and 5-year highest new growth rate. Oh, that's population, I'm sorry.
No, we're at the top of we are at the
Yeah,
top of the
yeah.
population
Yeah,
chart.
okay. Yeah.
But one of the things I
It's
think.
actually a good point, though, Carl, as a somewhat separate issue as to whether, you know, we as a town should be doing anything or could be doing anything
Yeah,
to
the
encourage
muse-
new growth.
use is huge.
That-
The muse is
That's another
huge.
It
discussion.
would certainly not harm us to have more revenue coming in from the business side.
Yeah, because
As
it
the drawdowns
really
in
in
services
1
tend
year.
to be less for a business generally. I mean, they do need other things from us, from the community, but they probably are less than if you had a single-family residence.
Well, the thing, okay, the higher population growth with middling growth in the tax base, basically
Yeah,
means that the overall
Revenue.
revenue, yeah, or basically the wealth, I guess, of individuals is not keeping up with some of the other towns, yeah. Individual households or whatever.
So, anyway, this is data that we're trying to use productively. There is other data that was collected by the benchmark group. Wally Johnson put together some spreadsheets. June's dug around and collected data mostly on the schools. I didn't bring that, probably could have printed that as well, but there's other school-related data that Wally provided to our meeting this morning. So this is the kind of stuff we're learning, but these demographic pieces I thought were the most instructive to our group rather than just the school statistics, like how we doing against MCAS and other towns and stuff like that.
Dean, I have to say, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is
This is
fantastic.
right off the DOR.
it's good to
They have
see-
some data that's pretty rich.
And given this, one would like to live in Lexington than in Concord. Because if you look at the per capita income, which pays the taxes, I mean, that's how you tax, come from your income, hopefully. We're at the bottom of the poll, out of 10, we're at the bottom in terms of per capita income.
Well, that's on the 5-year, but on a 10-year basis, we're in the middle of the pack. So, you know, we just seem to have had a drought here. I'm not sure quite what drives that. Why would that would be the case?
Yeah.
Now, these numbers for all of these, just so you're clear, I did not use 2018 because there's holes in the data. So I only drove those 5-year numbers starting with the 2017 and moving back from there. Because 2018 is spotty data if you look at the series. So I didn't use that, but,
But
but yeah, you're right, I mean,
there's enough data. We may not have 18, but we don't need 18 to look at what has happened
right.
over the last 10 years. So there's enough data to come up with a general idea of what the problem is.
Right. So,
How to solve it is a different way to look at it, but there's a problem.
In addition, it's obvious that we're starting from a higher level.
Right.
So not only are the relative rates of growth of some of these factors not where we'd like them to be, but we're starting from a higher level.
High level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So Dean, these are really interesting numbers.
Should be clean, but it's
And really helpful for
very
a
flaky.
bunch of things. But one question, so this is the benchmarking group, this is your group, but it's also the schools?
it's really the school, Bob Grum is on it, he's here.
But it's right back up.
The school committee formed a budget subcommittee. And my understanding of the way that was gonna be done was to do periodic budget reviews so that some of the stuff that we've talked about where line items get way out of whack and stuff, you know, is shuffled around, that the school committee has a clear understanding and is overseeing those processes. What this has turned into is a benchmarking subcommittee, not really a budget
I don't know
subcommittee.
how else.
So this
Yeah.
benchmarking subcommittee is working hard to come up with, you know, relatively decent comparative data against a reasonable cohort of towns that, you know, for lack of a better term, it's a sales tool so that the school committee can show that our budgets are giving us value. I don't know how else to characterize it, you know, and so are we lapdogs to that process? I'm not sure, but we're participating and we're contributing, so.
Is there a school budget committee?
Well, that's what this is called, but the charge is very narrowly focused right now on this benchmarking, on creating a comparative way of describing how we're doing against similar communities, which to me doesn't seem like a budget subcommittee.
There is nobody looking at the school budget in detail and looking at the spending and kind of things that we thought we were gonna get.
Well, I think there is some detailed looking that's going on. But
I
it's
know
not
that-
being done in the sense of budget overview in that regard. It's being done in this kind of comparative way to like
Budget
reach out,
benchmarking.
budget benchmarking, to
Yeah.
reach outside of town and see how do we do it, what do we pay, what do other communities do, how do they pay for what they're doing?
And comparing them.
Yeah, comparing them. So it's not an internal, like, we're sitting down with our budget and trying to manage our budget. That's not what this committee does. It's not how it's functioning. And I think that would be a wise thing for it to do. But
That's what we
right
thought.
now, that's what we thought it would do, but it's not what it does.
I thought there was gonna be two separate committees. I thought there was gonna be a budget committee and a benchmarking committee.
Well,
But
It's not a big deal, but I will remind people that were on the committee last year that when we referred a bunch of over budget items to them,
Right.
and we decided not to ask to meet with them and go over the items in detail, was because we thought a budget committee was going to be looking at those things. And I think we promised that they would.
I concur. I believe that's exactly the way that fanned out, and this does not feel like that. So, but that doesn't mean this isn't useful. I think this is, you know, providing information that's of interest.
there's another whole, I mean, I was looking at your minutes of whatever the last, and you're also looking at all the financial, fiscal parts of it as well, and maybe not all of them, some of them,
We
the
are.
cost per student.
Yes, we are. That's what I was saying. Wally presented a spreadsheet that was mostly the financials that go around the schools, that have to do with the schools. But
And there was something about the teacher, I guess,
teacher ratios to
Yeah.
FTEs per student.
I noticed one thing though that they didn't do the total hours. And they should, because they might find something out. There,
Hours. What?
the number of hours. that-
Instructional hours.
Course load.
Well, the hours
Yeah.
load, it's not the number of courses.
Right.
It's, yeah, basically the number of hours that the teachers are
Well, that-
working
oh, no,
as
we've-
compared
We've
to.
identified that. June did some very good
Okay.
detailed digging into individual teacher contracts across this cohort of towns. And our teachers, especially at the regional school districts, have a lighter course load by one than teachers in most other districts. Like, they have to do 4, ours do 3, but I think ours do 4 and they do 5.
But the overall number of hours also is, and there is a spreadsheet that shows that, so.
Is that
I've seen it.
information being used by this budget committee?
Well, we
at all?
can't do much about this. I mean, we've been made aware of it, but we're locked and loaded for the next 2 years with our current school contract, and those kinds of ratios and time commitments are built into the negotiated collective bargaining agreement. So, what are you gonna do? It is what it is, so.
Given the concerns that were raised in the last couple of months, in connection with what we're discussing now, I'm not moving this, just raising it for discussion for a moment. Something tells me it would make some sense to, since Bob is here from the school committee, whether this committee would say to him, our concern that we are hearing that a budget subcommittee has not been established by the school committee. We had been led, at least I had, I'll speak for myself, I had been led to believe, based on the public hearings, that there would have been that committee set up. I think we were very impressed by the superintendent when she came forward that, look, I'm going to be doing, I couldn't resolve everything in the few months she'd been here, totally understandable, but that she would be looking at a very hard new program coming for the new fiscal year. I was impressed, I think others were too, but I am disappointed tonight to hear that it doesn't appear that the budget subcommittee, at least as I understood, expressed to this committee. So I'm just raising whether we would feel comfortable to ask the representative from the school committee that's here to take back to the school committee our concern, and if the facts are correct, that we're disappointed.
I second that.
You're making a motion.
No, well,
With your second,
I'm
be
second-
careful.
I'm seconding what Tom says.
yeah, I'm happy to make
He
that
didn't
motion,
say-
but I didn't want to
he
make it
didn't say
until
was a
there's some
motion.
discussion.
I think Bob is heard, yeah.
Well,
I think,
We may have, sorry.
further to what Tom was saying, rather than simply freighting Bob with the chore of bringing this back to the school committee, this might be something that really warrants a letter to the effect that, and I believe it is true, not only you were led to believe this, but the finance committee was led to believe this. And if indeed that has not happened, then I think the entire finance committee is disappointed. And I think that warrants a letter rather than simply asking Bob to convey our shock and disappointment. And the letter could be put in the form of an inquiry, do we understand correctly that this has not happened? And if so, why not? And when will it happen? Because we agreed, and you seem to agree with us, that it was necessary.
Yeah, I know we were all very encouraged by hearing that that was gonna happen, and yeah. I remember several times convincing people that that was happening, was gonna happen, and, yeah.
It was the basis for us not, if you remember, my original motion was that I wanted to ask that the select board establish a budget review committee, that some sort of formal review committee. I was so concerned. This was in the aftermath of finding out about the payments,
Last spring, yeah.
the payments to the senior administrators for the vacation pay. And so I said, and we had evidence of all these other items that were severely over budget. Payments to consultants and so on. And so I wanted to establish ask the select board to establish some sort of committee that would include school committee members and the select board members and the finance committee to look at overpayments and look at the school budget and find out what was happening. And we deferred that, my motion on the ground that where there's gonna be a school budget committee that was gonna be looking into those sort of things. So, that was on the belief that it would be a school, but it's hard. I understand, it's hard to look at budgets. And every time.
Well, it's hard, it's sort of obtrusive to be looking at somebody else's budget, but, you know, it does affect us.
And it's, you know, it's hard work. I understand.
Well, to get it off center and to hopefully bring the discussion to an end, I would move that we direct the chairman of the finance committee to draft a letter directed to the superintendent, making an inquiry as to the progress on developing a budget subcommittee, which we had understood would be put in place, but that we have been advised that it appears not to have been put in place, and would appreciate knowing why. Is our fact correct? And if it has not been put in place, will it be put in place?
Okay, you made the motion.
Yeah.
Was it seconded?
I second it, but.
Okay, I was just gonna suggest, maybe we then table it, and I'll make some inquiries. And, you know,
That's fine.
Sounds good.
make sure we have the facts as they are. We're meeting next week. We can take it up again next week.
What,
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll try to give you the best color that I can regarding this, and Bob Gron can correct me if I'm misstating the case. I do think that the school committees were intent on creating a budget subcommittee, but the way the discussion transpired within that formulation, they prioritized, let's do this comparative benchmarking as a higher priority for our budgeting function, because they just felt like, well, we need to justify our existence or the existence of these budgets against, some comparative metrics against.
It's not to learn something
Well-
about.
Well, I think there was also the fact that that the superintendent was new.
So
And
maybe.
so we could work on this as she
Right,
got
she got her feet wet and got started.
grounded in the budgeting process, then maybe there would be that transition.
So the charge was written
Right.
very narrowly for this subcommittee. The charge does not actually really state that it will do budget review. It states that it will do benchmarking. So it's really not a budget subcommittee, I don't think.
Well, if that's the case, then I was, I misunderstood or worse.
Bob, can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Basically fair, I think it's a good idea to send a letter to respond.
And regarding a letter, I would suggest sending it to the school committees, not to the superintendent. They're in charge of setting this thing up. So it's not really not on her that this didn't get set up properly. It's
So
on
I'm
them.
happy to have it delayed and Carl make some inquiries.
Yeah.
Because a positive spin could be put on this. I think, speaking for myself, but I think most of us were very pleased with Lori's efforts to come before us in the presentations that she made in the very short time she had been here. And so I then coupled that with the budget activities and discussions we had. I came away from that saying, gosh, this is all good and positive. It's going to be a more open discussion, more open understanding. And so I would hope that would continue, because that's very positive for all of us. When I'm saying I'm at the town, not just the finance committee. And so I hate to see that drop off the radar if we still think it's important, because I think there's a great opportunity here.
One last thing, I wouldn't want to stop this either, and the benchmarking efforts, I think that's great information too. My only comment is, I thought that they were still gonna look at the details of the budget and the.
I thought there were gonna be two separate committees.
Yeah, so, my only disappointment is that nobody is looking at the questions that we had last year.
It ended up the same people were on both committees.
Because Anita does such a good job of taking minutes, And I do read them, because she sent them to me to read. I would withdraw my motion with the permission of whoever seconded it, and ask the chairman if he would make some inquiries and come back to us.
Fine, okay.
Yeah, I withdraw my second.
Yeah,
The matter will be taken up next week anyway, yeah.
So I think this committee has done some pretty useful benchmarking, comparative analysis in some of these aspects of the school budget. But it doesn't sound like, I would agree, that the scope of the committee has been exactly what was perhaps originally intended.
Not what we thought, no.
What we thought. Okay, well, that's wonderful.
Before you're done, are these and other data sets that have been presented to this benchmarking subcommittee available online, or are they?
These are spreadsheets that are on my desktop at home.
Okay.
But I can make them available to anybody who would like them electronically. And I can also point you to the Department of Revenue data universe where these came from, and there's a few other bits of data that, I mean, these are the most substantially useful data.
I think there's a tie-in between this and the sustainability
Right.
issues too, yeah, very much.
So I'll be happy to send them out to you, Tom, if you wanna. I don't really have like a website for them, or, you know, maybe I can create a Dropbox or something.
And the data on, teacher salaries,
Oh, that-
cost per
yeah.
pupil, all that sort of stuff, that,
That was provided, that was collected and aggregated by Wally Johnson, and I do have that, I can forward that as well, if you'd like to see that, we can share that as well. Just as a question, for the group, how do you feel this collection of communities is? I mean, we spent several meetings getting to this list. I don't think it's a bad list, but it is the list we ended up with. Is there any holes in here that we think would have been a better?
I'm personally pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it's
I
not-
think it's,
yeah,
I think it's a good one.
looks quite, you know, they're in this region.
Yeah.
And, you know, similar, you know,
Yeah, it's not like we're pulling in like Amherst Regional High School or something like
Right,
that. You know,
yeah. Manchester by, whatever, okay.
I'm still trying to,
I will just say, I agree with them. The ones that aren't in here, if it comes up that we don't have regional high schools, there's the Northborough, Southborough Regional High School, which is very comparable.
Yeah,
And that is-
you know, as far as this list goes, this is community data, and the stuff that Wally has collected is school data, and that does come in per district. So we do get Lincoln Sudbury, which are communities in here, we get Manchester Essex, we get Dover Sherburne. So those are the ones that we have included, which are regionals. Acton Boxborough is also included in that. And he's tried to do some work to aggregate, say, the Carlisle K through 8, the CPS K through 8, and then the region into a big, massive region, into a big, massive district that is K through 12. So he's done some work along those lines for us, for Lincoln Sudbury, and I'm trying to think if he did it for Dover Sherburne. He may have done it for Dover Sherburne. So there's 3 regionals that are in the list that we're working with, but Northborough, Southborough, we didn't select it.
It's just only because we used to always hear that Lincoln Sudbury was the only.
I know.
And
Yeah.
there is another K through 8 and 9 through 12, and that is the Northborough, Southborough, if you want to find one. And those two communities are not that different from.
There's also one on Martha's Vineyard, but I don't think we're going.
Yeah, no, I know. No, the thing is, that one
Yeah.
is fairly comparable
Yeah.
in terms of the demographics.
Yeah.
Dean, I have a question. What you're presenting is basically data.
Yeah.
Can you provide some inference on the data? Looking at the data, I'm trying to figure out what to make out of that. Because you're talking about tax bill, you're talking about value,
Well,
home value.
Yeah, the main.
Is there anything that you can say right now, at your look at it, how do you interpret this data?
Well, I guess what I'm, from the perspective of being a member of the FinCom, my concern, I guess the concern I have is are the tax levies that we are imposing on our residents consistent with their capacity to pay them and still not feel like stressed by the tax burden? And so looking at income versus income growth versus tax growth, looking at house value, increase in house value versus rate of tax growth, those are just some things that I think give us some indication as to whether or not the tax burden starts to become onerous over, if things continue to just move along, certain trends continue, whether that becomes onerous or whether that, we're all breathing easy and it's no problem for us to pay these taxes. I tend to think that it's kind of moving the other way, and it sort of confirms the chart that Scott's presented to us, which he always charts against CPI. I'm not sure, CPI is a very national number. I'm not sure how regionally relevant it necessarily is to us, but these kinds of statistics, which are derived right from the Department of Revenue, who gets our income taxes, they know what people make. I think these are pretty accurate and relatively relevant.
So my question, is there a regional CPI number available too? I mean, I'm sure you can't have a national CPI without having a regional CPI.
Oh, you can get,
You can get-
Northeast.
You can get middle, I think a
I'm
middle
not sure what
six.
Scott did with what CPI
I'm saying
he used.
if
Did he use
that's the-
regional one?
I think he
I'm
used,
saying
no,
if
I
that's
think
the
he used the
concern.
national.
He did.
Yeah.
Tom had found a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you can get regional ones. I've never gone there.
So I'm saying if
It's
that's
easy
a,
from college.
if that's a question that ever comes that what Scott did was national, we can get a regional number and then replot it based on regional CPI. So if there is a criticism, at least that goes away.
Yep.
Just get more regional data. But my question is here, and I haven't studied it, there's a lot of good data here. The per capita income, there's nothing we can do about it because there's no control over that. Now, per capita income depends on the people who come to the town. Affordable housing, if we support it, and the more vigorously we support it, are the Muse, development, new development, that will reduce the average per capita income. Okay. Now, unless we are doing more focus on affordable housing than Lexington or some other towns, and I don't know I don't have any facts on that, but I'm just trying to look at the data and say, what's the message here? There seems to be a problem, but I don't know exactly how I capture that problem and state it. But the per capita income, the town has no control other than if we make the town desirable, high income people might come in. But if we make it more affordable housing, which we believe in and we want to do that, that will bring the average income down. So it would be nice to have a comparison. Are affordable housing goals more aggressive than Lexington? Or are we about the same? Because that's the only factor I can.
Maybe you can look into that. And find
Yeah,
out.
no, I'm just,
I think that would be helpful, yeah.
I'm just
really,
raising
yeah.
some thoughts. How do we interpret this data? Because there's a lot of numbers here. And what does it mean to people here? But in terms of for people, what people care about is the residence value. Because with residence value going up by 2% or 5% makes a big difference. When and if people sell their house. If you keep it forever, it doesn't really matter. But when you do turnover, if it's growing 2% a year versus 5% a year, now, why the value is not going up? Is that something to do with the school? Because people don't put high value that our education system is better? I mean, those are the questions you have to dig in a little bit better to say, what is going on behind these numbers?
Well, ours are going up in the top third of the cohort, but it's not going up it's not like rip roaring at 5 or 8% annually, which is, some kind of old school number people might be dreaming about 15 years ago. It's just kind of perking along.
Yeah.
But it's not, in this grouping,
Anyway,
we're in the top
it's like
third.
8:40.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I'm working on a lot of those metrics for sustainability.
Sure, thank
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely a tie. Long-term capital planning. We had a meeting yesterday afternoon. Carrie was there, Tom was there. Mary was there, and Jane Hotchkiss was there. We talked about a couple of things. What would be the scope of capital projects or expenditures that we'd be looking at, and we, I think, really are focusing on large capital expenditures, excluded debt kind of expenditures. Well, not the police cars and that sort of thing. We talked about what is long-term, and typically the towns in Massachusetts have been looking at the 5-year, and that's what we've been doing, is a 5-year capital plan. But we were talking about at least 20 years, and some people were saying 30 or 50 years is really what we should be looking at to some extent. Basically, what came out of the meeting is Chris is going to put together a charge for a capital planning committee, which none of us would be eligible to serve on. But anyway.
Right.
Because we're on the finance committee. Yeah. But that's basically what came out of the meeting. Right.
Carl, did you ever talk about, I may have missed it, the development that the middle school funding was not approved by the state has bypassed it?
Yep.
So what happens then? I mean,
it will be resubmitted, and then, whatever, we don't know. I mean,
so
we'll get it next time.
So if we delay, so the question is in a little bit convoluted in the sense that if there is a need, are we doing it only because we get the state funding, or are we doing it because we need it?
Well,
Is that a
I
topic
think there
we
have been
wanna
studies
take
done
up
on the middle
now?
schools and.
Linda?
I was just saying, is that a topic we want to take up at this
Right
point?
now?
Well,
No.
it's a question of
I
fact.
think the topic has been researched very thoroughly. There is a report that was put together at pretty substantial expense last year, and it's available. We can, I don't know.
Is that available?
It is available.
Okay.
I'm not sure, is it on the school committee website?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's, I got it from there, yeah. So it goes over the schools and everything that's going wrong with them, and how yeah. And how they come up with the funding. So, let's try to move along, because it's getting a little bit late here. Correspondence, basically, there wasn't really anything that came in this month. I finally got the reply back to Kevin Park about the Esterbrook Woods and the legal action that the town has initiated on that. I will say that at the select board meeting the other night, there were a group of people who are also from that area who kind of wanted to explain their thoughts to the finance committee. Basically, what I said to Kevin Park and I said to them is that we have our meetings, we have citizen comments section, and there will be hearings on those things, and they're welcome to participate, to come and say what they want to say. But, on the chair report, let's see, there basically, there was one select board meeting so far this month on Monday night. There was a brief discussion about the town budget. Basically, that we're within there. The town is within $200,000 of our guideline at this point, and we will be talking about it further. We had the upcoming meeting calendar. Well, we all have the calendar. It's in the meeting minutes from last meeting. Just pay attention to it, because there's going to be a lot of meetings, and each of them has, particular key role in running up to town meeting. Observer, I said I was gonna go counterclockwise, so on observer report.
I have no report. I missed the meeting of the Comprehensive Long Range Planning Commission just prior to Christmas. So I will be there tomorrow morning, and next week's meeting I will have a report.
Okay.
Nothing to report. There were no meetings requiring my observation since last time.
Nothing to report.
I did attend the light plant, light board meeting this month, and as I reported last month, the big topic is the rate increases, substantial rate increases. And the one thing that you will start to see is the light board is going to start a publicity campaign, similar to what we are talking about. I think some of us have been talking about to get their position out, and why the rates will be going up due to the that we're now incorporating renewable energy sources as part of our purchase of light or energy due to the town meeting held last year. So the main topic at the meeting was organizing that publicity campaign. But I think it was a good lesson for us, something that we should think about as a committee or as a board. The process of educating the public about the positions that they took, and something that we should think about, with the
You're right.
sustainability
Yeah.
and getting our positions out.
Yeah, I think maybe we should try to bring that up at next week's meeting. Yeah. Ryan?
Retirement board, the retirement board and the personnel board met while I was out for the holiday, so I will circle back and have any details that are relevant to the finance committee. I don't know. I haven't seen the minutes yet. The planning board met on Tuesday, but there was nothing relevant pertaining to the finance committee.
Nothing to report.
Was at the DPW meeting last night, and there was nothing material that came out of that for report.
Did they admit that they were off on their snow forecast?
Well, there was a lot of patting on the back for how they've handled the storms.
Oh, okay. So
So-
they had some sort of expert come in who said it wasn't gonna snow in January.
Yeah, they might.
Which, what was
They might want to ask for a refund on that. So,
Well, January isn't over yet.
yeah.
Nothing to report.
I did attend the CHDC meeting on Tuesday night, and there was an update on Junction Village from Walter Ohanian. He was present, and he mentioned that they have been keeping up with the applications to the state in terms of getting the tax credits. So they applied for the pre-application. I don't understand exactly all the terms as of the end of November. And now the next deadline is the notice of funding availability. They have to comply with and do a filing for that, which is due February 15th.
That would be like the matching, basically like
That they have the sources of funds.
Other than
And I think they have to identify, the buyer of the tax credits and so on, so that the state has conviction that if they are awarded the tax credits, which again, they don't expect to get on this round anyway, but that they have what's necessary in place to move forward. If they get the tax credit, essentially the state wants them to be able to move forward with all the other funding elements in place. And he said in preparation for that submission that they will, they've been going through all of the construction numbers and projections that they presented to us to see if they need any revisions, because obviously the construction environment is a bit different now. So They haven't finalized that, but they will have for the application mid-February. And at the meeting of the CHDC on the 13th of February, they'll have their numbers ready, and he'll present any changes that they might have. I think if you remember, the town wouldn't be subject to those changes if there are any. So we're
Promised that it was all gonna be.
it's the select board had that signed,
Well,
sealed, and
there's a
delivered.
MOU, right? Signed
Right,
MOU.
but it could change for them somewhat the economics of it. So it will be informative if anyone wants to go to that meeting. And there were,
Question, did
Yeah.
they express any hedging language around the revision at all?
no. And he was also asked the question about tax reform. And he said, yeah, prices are likely to drop for property values. And time will tell, I mean,
But as far as the tax credits, that's still,
time will tell. I'm,
Well, the
right
ability
now,
to-
the issue is that companies who have lower tax rates have less incentive to be buying up tax credits. So the question is, there was already an excess of people, chasing down the tax credits, and now if there are fewer companies looking at the advantages of them, the market will thin out. So, as he said, time will tell how it will all shake out.
Is the town at risk in any way?
No, remember, we're like last dollar in.
That's right.
So, I mean, we're at risk, I guess, more in that this project might not
not
be,
take off.
might not be completed. I mean, but we would still have, and so that would be the risk, is that it's an opportunity lost. I don't think there's a risk in terms of out of pocket. Yeah.
Thanks.
Not being on the lawyer side of the room, that's just my impression. No.
You did a nice job of explaining it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, on the funding, the affordable housing funding committee or anything, have they come up with anything, or?
No, I mean, I think originally they thought they might present at town meeting, and now I think
There's-
they're
There's no warrant.
there's nothing in the
there
warrant,
was-
so I think that, as we found, affordable housing is a really tough issue. And they are going through, I think, in a slow but systematic way in terms of looking at what other communities are doing and what other options are, and what, would require state approval and what the town could do. So they're really trying to look under every stone and be creative about this, but it's not an easy answer. I think, again, they're going to end up with trying to add permitting fees or fees in terms of property sales or registrations, whatever. But they're not there yet, and so I don't think we're going to hear very much at this year's annual meeting or town meeting. Probably next year is when this issue will really have more visibility. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, yeah. I mean, they will come up with some options that I believe, yeah. But I'm on like Google search for affordable housing, and every day I get 10 or 12 little notices for this town, that town, the other. It's all the same. It's all the same. Nobody could figure out, raising money for affordable housing. It's a very, exactly. Exactly. Now, and we'll see if the state had been talking about, if we taxed, like Airbnb kind of operations, putting that into affordable housing. So it's going to have to be something, to really make an
I mean,
impact.
the only thing, if you can build enough of it, like hundreds of units, you can have an internal subsidy that some of the units are more expensive, which will subsidize the
Right.
affordable units, but you really have to do a lot to make that work, to actually make units affordable.
Yeah, and then there are a whole lot of issues about the quality of, does that really make an affordable community by doing that? Which, versus having sort of integrated throughout the community, real housing that is affordable, as opposed to highly subsidized units that, it doesn't build a community. It's a lot that they're weighing that's not just dollars and cents as well. So they're doing a good job.
It's a tough
It's
problem.
a tough one.
Anything to add? So, what happened last night?
All right, so I went to the school committee's joint meeting last night. They are, they're struggling with our guideline, and there was no real even agenda item to discuss trying to move it closer. Just, but there was some open discussion of what is its meaning to Lori Hunter and the school system generally. And what they're doing is they're meeting really aggressively to try to come up with contingency planning, because they're going out with the budget they want. And, the school board has been very good about supporting her. We're only willing to go this deep. And she's like, "This really, let's draw the line," or "Here's some more stuff," and they go, "No, we can't even countenance that." So you were at that meeting. So what was mentioned, however, which was really kind of a shocker even to committee members, was when you put a person's job in some sort of unstable state, like they might be cut, or she has to go out and say, there are positions out here that may go away. These people can then get unemployment insurance, even though they're not going to lose a day of work. It was a really weird, Bob, am I misstating that?
No, but, we asked for more clarification on that point, so we're gonna hear more definitive.
So the instability of not being at the guideline makes the school committee and the super have to do really serious contingency planning, which may put jobs at risk. And she has to be transparent about that and say, okay, these things might happen if we really cannot come to an agreement and the town votes for the FinCom guideline, then these things might happen and your job may evaporate.
Dean, you need to check that. That doesn't make sense at all.
Well,
I mean, people are not.
Talk to John Flaherty, he stated it
Well,
multiple times.
it sounds like John Flaherty, but I'm saying it's just on the surface, it doesn't make sense.
I've never heard of.
I've never,
unemployment.
it
Well,
was
let's
a
just-
surprise.
Yeah.
So let's state it for the
Surprise to
record.
me, it was a surprise to committee members, but John said that this can happen. It has something to do with contractual obligations to provide, job security, and if you.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing. This is not.
Unless it's something, it's an internal
Bob,
insurance.
correct me if
in the
I'm wrong.
contract. But it's not the state and federal unemployment.
If that were the case, it will be a different country. So let's just say that's not true. That if we say I can't guarantee you a job, then you get unemployment.
So if you were to go out in June, the school year ends, you go out,
Right.
and you do not know, because you don't know whether or not your job will be at risk because the town meeting voted X, and you don't know.
Yeah.
Over the summer, you can collect unemployment because you don't know if you're gonna be called back in. You have no assurance that your job will be brought back the next year. And you've been told you're at risk. I think you can collect unemployment through the summer. And then you get a notice that, guess what, you're not fired, your job is re-upped. unemployment is yours, I guess. I really don't understand how it works.
That is a correct,
I
we
think
often
that-
hear about it in June, late April
Yeah,
and
exactly.
May. Many school committees, because they don't know what their budget portends for the fall.
Right.
They have to give teachers notice under the law that they're gonna be suspended.
They're at risk.
They're at risk.
They're at risk.
So they're effectively out of the job.
Right.
And therefore they go on unemployment, and then they can get brought back come late August, September. But that period of being out, I would be fairly confident is eligible for unemployment insurance.
Okay, so I'm not crazy. That's how I interpreted it, and my interpretation is
Not
the best.
I would like to talk to you because you cannot be compensated.
Mr. Grom, because he's on
Just out of
I don't wanna laugh, but
curiosity,
that's, you
what
know.
is I mean, obviously, their unemployment,
You cannot collect for potential loss.
I mean,
You
your
only
premium
collect
goes
for
up,
loss.
your-
If you're paying.
Come on.
Yes,
You're
yeah.
paying.
Where do you,
So
They've been taking.
Tom Flaherty said it has happened.
they don't
before,
collect paycheck?
Where they've had to, where they've had to
Do they
pay
collect paycheck otherwise?
certain members
They're not
who
laid
then
off?
never really lost a day of work because they are re-upped when they come back and say, it has happened. We're, their payments are.
that doesn't make sense.
But,
Okay.
let's not get into that.
Let's
too
try
much.
to keep
Hold
going.
on, let's
Okay.
gotta keep,
Yeah.
and so, what else did they have? They did mention the joint
Might have
meeting,
fire.
they had
Insurance.
they had a presentation from the Board of Health who are trying to elicit support for their ban article on marijuana. So they had,
Are they trying to have the school committee or the schools, actually provide, actual support?
yes, they're looking for them to please support our article, and you send us a letter saying that you're in favor of banning the sale of marijuana. That's what they're asking of the school committee. Now, the school committee had a brief discussion, is this really our role to weigh in on this? Well, we do have children, so maybe we should. They punted it for a meeting or two. They may well vote to support the ban, or they may well take a vote, put it that way. But, there was at least a minor discussion about, gee, is this really in our bailiwick? Why are we gonna be supporting or not something that has to do with 21-year-olds? But they may well vote because they feel like they have to protect the children that are in the schools. I don't know. So the other thing that I think is of interest, and Phil was talking about how the light plant has had to go out with a promotional, series of meetings, is that they're scheduling a series of 4 to 6 coffees where they will have a few committee members present, and you can come in and ask, why is your budget way beyond what the FinCom is? So they're going to be on sort of a listening tour. They're out there to promote their need, and so they are using their time wisely to create coffees and talk to their community of people. So just letting you know that that's something that they're doing. That's all. Yep.
Oh, there. You're right.
I will be very quick. Just wanted to let you know, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we were very busy the end of December with people coming in paying their taxes early. We had a number of people who paid through the mail and overpaid more than even the third and fourth quarter, so we will be going through a process to refund overpayments because we can't accept anything past the fiscal year. We just finally have received our fiscal 17 audit. We received that yesterday. We will be reviewing it with the auditors tomorrow. And then there is a financial audit advisory committee, which is a separate citizen committee that receives the audits of the town and the regional school district. They have a meeting on Wednesday, the 17th, to review our fiscal 17 audit and management letter. Late.
An observer to that meeting?
No, I don't think we
Either
did get a
Jean or
financial
I
audit
usually go.
advisory committee person. Yeah.
Should we? Can we?
Well, I think that would be a good idea.
Anybody is welcome to attend.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, John's gonna,
That meeting is,
6 AM?
it's not at 6 AM, it's at 8:30 AM, and I believe we're at 141 Kais Road.
Sorry, what day was it again?
Wednesday, the 17th. Late this afternoon, we received our OPEB valuation as of 6/30/17, so I just looked at it quickly. I haven't gone through it, but based on what I saw, our funding is up to 28%. We were at about 22% a year ago, so that's good news. We are funding our annual required contribution. We began meetings with our health insurance or our insurance advisory committee to talk about health insurance. If you were at the select board meeting on Monday or watched it, you heard that we've put the select board on notice that if we are not able to reach an agreement through our informal channels with all of the collective bargaining groups, we will look to them to invoke certain sections of Mass General Law that allow for expedited bargaining for health insurance. We don't expect to have to do that, but there is a process that we have to follow. We are making some what we think are minor changes to our plan design effective June 1, 2018. We're just changing some of the copays and deductibles. We haven't made changes to the health insurance plans since 2012. So while we have increased our premiums year after year, we haven't made any changes to the plan design. So we are doing that, as well as offering a high deductible plan. Both making changes to existing plans and, believe it or not, offering a new plan have collective bargaining implications, different types of requirements, but we are going through that process. And we've had 2 meetings, we've had great attendance, and I expect that we would be able to get through the process just in the informal manner that we have been following, and we'll be able to make those changes.
Terry, what is our cost share arrangement at present?
It depends on the type of plan. We offer 4 different types of plans. We offer individual plans and family plans, and our contribution rates are between 50 and 63%, depending on what plan you are on or type of plan. And the last thing I wanted to mention, and I've already sent out an email, I will be part of a panel going before the Joint Committee on Revenue to talk about the implications of the new federal tax law on, it's a panel to talk about state and local government. My particular interest is in this charitable trust arrangement, and so anybody who is interested in providing any information to me, or if you've come across an interesting article, please send it over to me because I'd be happy to take a look at it. We have other panelists who will be talking about the implications to municipal borrowing, and the limitation on the state and local tax deductions and such. So,
do you have some idea how the charitable trust will work?
I don't. I do know that it would require a change in the state law or new legislation to allow that, because there isn't anything that currently would allow it. So that really would be my focus.
Has any state done that before?
I understand that there are some communities in New Jersey that they must have some ability to allow it on the local level, because it doesn't seem to be across the board in New Jersey. I haven't heard or come across yet any other state that's allowing that. But this would be something that would be, I guess, run by the town, because we wouldn't want to get into having a separate organization with a separate board with a, where, we're taking the town budget to another board. So this really maybe would be something like, we have the trustees of town donations, a separate board that oversees that, or maybe it's with just the select board.
And then it's voluntary and then you get credit? Is that the way?
That's essentially how it would work.
So if you overpay, let's say you make twice the contribution one year, would the town give you credit next year?
Well, those are all things that we,
Have to be worked out.
yeah, we would have to
But
work
the
out.
basic idea is that the individuals in the town write a check and say, call it a contribution to a different fund. And the
Yes,
town, when they send the tax bill, you get the credit on your tax bill.
yes, that's basically how it's working.
You have an idea of how much money you took in that you wouldn't have taken in?
Yeah, it's hard to say because we have a lot of people who would regularly come in and pay in December, and we don't have any easy way of splitting out
Okay,
whether they
okay.
made a third payment or both third and fourth payment. We did have lines out the doors. It was busier than regular tax days for us, and we had a lot of activity online and through the mail.
I have to commend you for the way you, for the decision you made. It was spot on with the IRS guidance that came out. But you made that decision, I think, before the IRS guidance came out.
We did,
And,
yeah, we did.
So you just, you did exactly the right thing. So
Well, I expected that the state was going to back us up, so that was I was sort of blindsided by that, but, yeah, and we had a lot of people asking about that, and for the most part, people understood.
Well, I just, again, to commend you, I some pretty fancy towns went another way and accepted taxes for the whole.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said some pretty well-known towns went another way and accepted taxes for the whole year. And to Carrie's credit and the Board of Assessors,
Assessors, for sure.
they decided to do exactly what the IRS said you could do, which is accept only taxes for for bills that had already been issued. And that was the right decision. The IRS, a couple of days after they decided to do that, the IRS came out and said that's all you could do. But by then, some well-known towns, I think like Wellesley and maybe, or Weston or somebody, at least that I had noticed, had been already accepting taxes for the whole year. So they were right.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Well,
Citizen
I-
comments?
Citizens, any?
Oh.
Oh, okay,
Tom?
Not me tonight.
okay, well, yeah, I was afraid we might have some citizens, but we didn't, so.
They don't want to comment. They're here.
So, a motion to adjourn?
Second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Aye. We have to do